if you think I look normal. Thanks everyone for saying that. 812 days ago was the last time I felt normal. At that time, I was better than normal. Cedric and I had secretly eloped in Las Vegas drive-thru, moved from Geneva to Manila, and I started working at my dream company. In my first month at work, last June 19, 2017, after a long day of meetings, I had dinner with my friend at a restaurant just below my office in Singapore.
It was 11:01 on a beautiful Monday evening. I remember receiving her friend's call, and I remember the call was short, but very impactful. Few words stood out. Hit, her head, fall, hospital, blood clot. And then the terrible sentence. You have to approve the surgery now, otherwise she dies. It's 11:03, and I felt like someone was pulling my heart out of my chest. I run to the airport, I jump into the flight, and in 3 hours flight with no news, I remember thinking, what happened? What could possibly have happened? We were just planning to go to Europe, we were just planning to get married. And right now, the only plan I had was for her not to die as the plane was landing. 8 hours of surgery, and then the doctor comes out and explained to me, or trying to explain to me, severe traumatic brain injury with brain bleed damage to the left, frontal, and temporal lobe. But he was reminding me that actually we were a little bit lucky because only 15% of patients like her make it alive so far. But I cannot hear him. I'm looking at her, and I remember leaving her at the airport, so excited for her week to come. And right now, she was lying in bed, lifeless, half-shaved, connected to half a dozen machines, with tube in her nose, mouth, and in her skull. I remember wondering what happened. 21 days in coma. She stayed 21 days in coma. 21 days were 3 surgeries and 2 pieces of skull, the size of my hand, removed from her skull. 6 CT scans and 7 days of brain swelling, which meant more complication or the risk to die. After all of it all, the doctor came to us and tried to explain to us that damage to her brain were so severe that we had to get prepared. The person we know is gone. She will never be the same. And I remember telling myself, how is that possible? What we actually did wrong? Life is so unfair. And more importantly, how can a simple blow to the head would change someone entirely?
My waking up from coma, it never happened like it was shown in movie or TV show. My first words were not even dramatic or poetic, like, where am I, or what happened. My first word was just fuck, and I'm sorry I said that, by the way. Who am I is the furthest thing from my mind. I had to re-identify with things that were normal to me before, but I didn't know how to eat, how to swallow, or how to use the toilet. I couldn't sit up, stand up, or walk, and I lost sight on my right eye. My brain was operating at 40% with aphasia, which in my case meant that my brain would hear something completely different than what was said. I remember this exercise with my sister. She had to read a simple sentence out loud, and I would repeat back what I've heard. Her sentence was, "It's a diamond in the rough," and what I heard was my big red ball was round. It was a daily struggle, not just about comprehension, but finding the right words to use when I'm talking to you. When I was asked to name an animal, I wanted to say panda, because I'm Chinese. When I can see this picture in my head, what came out of my mouth was black eye. I was betrayed by my brain. I couldn't trust my brain to work like it did before the accident. I graduated #1 in my course in university. I worked in marketing in 3 Fortune 500 companies for 20 years. I lived in 7 countries over 14 years, but I can't speak a right word or sentence in any of the 4 languages I spoke. I was trapped in a brain that I could not fix.
She was a shell of who she was. She weighed only 40 kilos, and she was tied to her bed with tubes in her nose. And she was tied to the bed so she would not pull the tube from her nose. In the evening, I would try and go to visit her right after work. But at night, in the evening, I had to leave her. And at that time, her eyes were empty and distressed. She was trying to cry, but she was screaming, begging me to stay with her in the hospital and not leave her tied to her bed at night. I remember walking through the corridors, and I remember feeling like walking through hell with a knife stick to my heart. Her mood was like a giant swing. At times, she would be happy, simple, in complete denial of what was happening. Other times, she would be angry and frustrated. She would throw pillows or bite us when we were trying to help. And I remember at that time thinking, who is this person in front of me? How can a simple blow to her head change her completely and entirely?
It's hard to answer who I am. I didn't even know who I was. It took me weeks to regain control of my body, months to control over my emotional swings, but a 2-second of fall gave me a lifetime of brain damage that I cannot control. My doctor described me as below average. You can see that my below average brain compared to a normal average brain. What I can think of all the time, below means lower, worse, less. Compared to an average brain, I am less to think, less to say, less to understand. That also meant I am less than normal me, lesser in value, less deserving to be loved. Outside, I look normal. Everybody raised your hand a while ago. Outside is the same, but inside is all different. My brain is different than your brain. And this difference means that I'm below average.
We used to travel the world together, but now suddenly the hospital was our world. I remember one of those evenings when I was coming and visiting her. She could still barely talk. She could not even actually stand by herself in the bed. But then she tried to whisper to me, try, leave. And I remember what she meant at that time, that I should leave her to try to at least live a better life. I did not leave her. I knew she would need her full strength to possibly make a recovery. And I knew I could help. My objective was to give her courage and hope to fuel this strength. So as soon as I could, when I could visit her in the hospital and she could actually eat by herself, I would bring fancy food in the hospital. And we would try to have normal dinners watching movie, even if she could not understand everything with her aphasia. But I knew that as I was bringing some normality in her life, I was also bringing hope and courage, which would give her strength for her recovery.
I didn't know who I am, but he knew. When I couldn't remember anything, he kept my memories. When I forgot any lyrics from my favorite song, he sang to me, even when his voice is really bad. He was the biggest reason why I wanted to recover, to come back. My objective was to be normal. Normal means I want to go back playing mahjong with my family. I want to go back to work, keep my friends. I want to laugh with Cedric like I've always had. I didn't want my promotion. I didn't want more money. I didn't want to be more famous. I just want to be me. I started over again, relearn everything. How to walk, how to talk. I know that I'm the only one who would know my brain can do before and after the accident. I was recommended to do a speech therapist 2 to 3 times per week. I asked them to change the lesson plan guidelines because I want to do it every day. I asked them to do grammatical lessons, writing daily in a journal, practicing presentations. At the same time, I demanded to do homework every day. At that time, I'm also going to a physical therapist to do light boxing. After my homework, I'm also playing great brain games apps on my phone. Anything to accelerate my progress and get back to normal ASAP. I hate limitations. It restricts me how to say, how to think, how to understand. My doctor told me that after 6 months, my progress would slow down from 10% increase every month to 0.1%. It was so annoying. I just ignore him because I want to do what I want to do. I kept my brain therapy while at the same time I'm organizing our wedding details in south of France, 11,000 kilometers away. Even with a below average brain, I did a test and I scored 95th percentile on the test. Yes, finally. Thank you. Finally, that meant I could go back to work. 1 year and 2 weeks after the accident, we celebrated our marriage. Our vow to stay together when in the sickness, in the worst parts of time, that wasn't a promise, but a reality. Fate let us meet together and get married, but it was our choice to stay married. Ours was not a perfect marriage, but two imperfect people who are perfect together.
As we were both fighting to get normality into our crazy life, she was fighting to try to go back to who she was. I was fighting to try to keep our life afloat. At the end of the day, work was reassuring me that I would actually be able to pay the bill. After all, few people know, but severe TBI is one of the most expensive disabilities there can be. Between doctors, therapists, hospitals, a severe TBI patient can cost up to $500,000 a year. I wanted to make sure that she would focus on her recovery and she would not worry about the materialistic aspect of it. But then I got to learn about myself. I also got to discover that work was beyond the materialistic aspect of it. Work was also a way to reassure me. It was the only part that still felt normal, and I needed this normality to give her strength.
After 14 months in the accident, I'm back to work. And I was so happy and proud that my first one-on-one meeting with my boss, I told him to judge me as a normal person. And he actually did, because after 6 weeks, he replaced me from handling a big client. He also told me that the other clients that I'm handling, I'm not doing well enough. Frustration and anger stopped my progress. I would understand meetings about 60%, now 0%. When I hear an English word, it just sounded gibberish. On top of it all, I had a miscarriage a few days after. In 2 strokes, I felt alone, unvalued, and stupid. During the year, I saw pieces of me that I kept losing. My famous 24-hour energy would deplete now in 8 hours. I would spend hours reading a book, now 10 minutes. I stumble to record new information and more on and on and on. I would ignore these losses because I had to concentrate and focus on studies, lessons, plans. But understanding 0% of the meetings was the last straw that broke the camel's back. It made me see the totality of the identity that I've lost. I grieve for old me that I know forever, that I will miss because it will never come back. I grieve for our baby, who was our hope to be happy, as simple that I've healed from brain injury, and it didn't happen.
18 months after her accident, she was fighting to do what so few severe TBI patients ever managed, actually go back to work and stay and succeed there. But the extent of her disabilities, which we had months to process, were just hitting her like a hammer, smashing her dreams and hope of a normal life. But I knew I could help. She was hitting rock bottom, and I had experience with that, because I was here in the first few months of her recovery. I needed to help her and tell her examples of how I went through it. I will always remember that one day where I felt the tide was too strong. It was too hard. She was fighting me in the hospital. She was calling me names. She was pushing me away from her hospital rooms. At the same time, I was trying to go back to work, but I was failing miserably. More importantly, I felt so lonely. I was so far away from family and friends. She was my only family in this part of the world. So I decided to fight the tide by starting to put a smile on her face. So I decided to go to a flower shop and buy her flowers. As I entered the flower shop, I pushed on a little shelf that was here. And I broke a little statue that was here in the flower shop of the word dream. And I was like, life, are you serious with me? Believe it in sign or not, at that time, it felt like life was teaching me that rock bottom is actually bottomless. And you should better get used to the view down there. It felt like life was hitting me with a rock in the face, smashing my dreams and hope, literally. And then again, this is the example I had to tell her. How do you keep going after that? The very first thing is if you're going through hell, just keep going. It's worth it. The other thing is that you might not decide when will life hit you in the brick with a brick in the face. But it's up to you to decide what you build with that brick. And that little piece is sitting proudly at home, stitched back together, and I didn't give up on my dreams. This is what I had to teach her. This is the energy and the hope I had to give her. Keep going. Yes, her blow to the head took away so many things from her, but it didn't take away the core of what she was. And it was up to her to build the end of the story. Because it's the strength of her heart and courage that will keep screaming to the world who she is. And more importantly, because I was so in love with so many things that were taken away from her, but I was more in love with what was left.
It was hardest to do is to let go of my anger, my pride, my old me. My new me is not better. I have brain damage and I struggle with every day. Sometimes I feel stupid. Sometimes I'm so fatigued after work. Sometimes so slow to remember things. But every day, the internal fights and feelings keep littler and easier. My brain stops shutting down at work. I keep improving speaking and writing, and now I can answer our clients' questions about 80% of the time. Cedric and my family have helped me to remind me that my core, my most important part of me, is same. I'm a badass that never gives up. I accept my insecurities, my doubts, and my limitations. I adjust myself to try to think differently so I can find solutions, like recording a meeting so I can go back to it. I focus and fight myself to do a speaking in public, like right now, because it's such a weakness for me. And I ask for help even when I share vulnerabilities. I am different, but I'm never less than. I can't go back to normal, but I've found a new normal. It's a place where it gives me comfort, stability, and knowing that when I remove my mask, I can learn and adapt my flaws. There's no need to hide anymore because there's another one who will never stop loving me. And that peace gives me much greater and bigger than being above average. I'm one of 69 million people that get traumatic brain injury every year. Brain injury is an invisible syndrome. People won't see that you have a brain damage, and our struggle is every day. Our story may sound like it came from a movie, but brain injury patients and their families out there, they live very much reality with all our problems. Please be nice and patient and understanding. 812 days ago, our lives, our days, ourselves have changed.
but we made time our friend. And what we thought was the end was actually just the beginning.
We're both evolving, and our journey is 1% finished. Thank you.